MedRhythms is a digital therapeutics company that uses sensors, software, and music to measure and improve walking following neurologic disease or injury. When I saw music therapy for the first time and the impact that it had, it changed my life. Because I knew at that moment that if we could understand more about why these outcomes were possible, that's when we could really harness the power of music and replicate it to help a lot of people. MedRhythms started at Spaulding Rehab Hospital in Boston, the #2 rehab hospital in the country. We built a therapy program using hands-on music therapy to help people improve their outcomes on their brain injury and stroke unit.
It's making a difference to so many of our patients. Oftentimes, it's the neurological music therapy that reaches them for
My first mic I've ever used.
never repeat the question.
Is that what the instructions were?
That's what the instructions were.
Right.
We'll wait for them to give us a thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever Jen's ready. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you can make it to this talk about entrepreneurship. This is the second year we've done this, and really excited to see all of your interns from all over the state and different companies. Today, we're hoping to give you a little bit of background about us, a little bit about our companies, and then dive into very high level, what it takes to start a company and be an entrepreneur, whether you're starting a company or whether you're internal to a company. We request if you have questions throughout, feel free to interrupt us, put your hands up, etc., because what is on your mind is probably on lots of people's minds. We also have giveaways for people who ask questions, and so that's good. My name's Owen McCarthy, co-founder and president of MedRhythms, and I'm glad to be joined here by...
I'm James, and I am the co-owner of a company called Flowfold. I'm never shy about branding that. What's going to be really interesting, this is my first time at this talk, but you'll see some themes. There's a very large difference and gap between what Owen is trying to do with MedRhythms and what I'm trying to do with Flowfold. And what's exciting for us to be able to talk about that, as I've known Owen for years, we'll get into it, but you can do basically anything in between what we're trying to do, and probably you can go off on a lattice between even from there. So you'll see those themes, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Great. James, you want to do full background on yourself now that you did mini background?
Sure. So I grew up, this is a very old photo, and we graduated from the University of Maine together, but I grew up in Lewiston, Maine, and I went to Lewiston High School, graduated in 2006, and then went to the University of Maine and graduated in 2010 with Owen. And you kind of look back at my history, it's ironic in many ways. We grew up in a mill town, both my grandparents worked in the mill. My dad told me to go to college so I would never be in manufacturing, and here I am in manufacturing. But I'm really proud of what I do now, and when I got out of college, I jumped into the corporate world. I started at a Fortune 500 medical device company called Stryker Orthopedics. I did that for several years, had the entrepreneurial bug, joined a startup pharmaceutical company downtown Portland called Putney, which was it was in the animal health space. That raised $60 million in VC funding and then sold in 2016 for $200 million out of a company in the UK called Decra. At that time, I sort of cashed out of that opportunity and went in full-time with Flowfold and became co-owner with my two friends that we've been working on Flowfold since 2010, and that's officially when the LLC of Flowfold started.
Excellent. And as I said, I'm Owen McCarthy. I grew up in Patton, Maine. Anyone from like Aroostook County, northern? Yes, there we go. Represent a couple of people, yeah. I grew up in Patton, 100 miles north of Bangor, Maine. Went to the University of Maine, studied biological engineering there. Soon found out that I didn't want to be an engineer, though I like talking about science and working in science, and so that's been a theme throughout my life. James and I actually met in organic chemistry class. We used to study, we were nerds studying about chemistry molecules back in the day. I left UMaine, moved to Boston, was there for 6 years, had a technical sales role at a chemical company, helped start a 3D printing of electronics company where we raised like $16 million to print wires and antennas directly into objects. Went to business school, and then since have started a company called MedRhythms, which I'll tell you a little more about, in Boston, and moved it back to Maine about 4 years ago. Clicker. All right. So MedRhythms, I have a little video here I want to show you to give you an intro to the company.
MedRhythms is a digital therapeutics company that uses sensors, software, and music to measure and improve walking following neurologic disease or injury. When I saw music therapy for the first time and the impact that it had, it changed my life. Because I knew at that moment that if we could understand more about why these outcomes were possible, that's when we could really harness the power of music and replicate it to help a lot of people. MedRhythms started at Spalding Rehab Hospital in Boston, the #2 rehab hospital in the country. We built a therapy program using hands-on music therapy to help people improve their outcomes on their brain injury and stroke unit.
It's making a difference to so many of our patients. Oftentimes, it's the neurological music therapy that reaches them for the first time, and it's pretty profound.
Walking to me is so important, and it's taken for granted because it just comes natural to so many people. And that's something that's kind of been taken away from me.
What we quickly found was that people were getting better faster, with greater results,
Music therapy really helps me achieve walking straighter, decrease in falls.
We now had the neuroscience to not only explain how it was possible, but also how we replicate those improved outcomes. And there's no other stimulus on Earth that engages our brain as simultaneously, as globally as music does. It actually aids in the process of neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to create new connections or strengthen old connections throughout your entire life. This gives us an exciting new way to help people in a novel form.
The company was started around that question of how do we reach more people? We said, we need to find a way to build a software product that replicates a clinician's brain.
I had 2 strokes, left me with no left peripheral vision, mobility issues. I have to walk with a cane.
I had a brain hemorrhage and stroke from an aneurysm, which left me weak on my left side.
The stroke was on my right side, so I had a left side deficit. I had like a foot drag, weakness on my left side.
Intuitively, we all have a sense of dancing and movement related to music. But now we're using it based on the latest neuroscience, bringing that into an algorithm that understands where are the user's feet and how are they relating to the rhythm of the music is playing.
You put this clip on your shoe and you don't feel it and you're walking to the beat.
We have a very sensitive set of sensors that are collecting medical grade gait data on the users. And then we're relating that to how well are they in training, which is basically how well are you walking to the beat of the music.
Entrainment trial. Keep walking and follow the beat of the music.
It's not like you're taking a medication and there could be harmful side effects.
The only side effect is if I sing out loud, you know?
We actually have the capacity to use any piece of user-preferred music, which we hope makes it engaging and motivating.
Company that's using sensors, software, and music to help people improve and measure their walking following neurologic disease and injury. We started with a therapy practice, and my co-founder Brian was a therapist at Spalding Rehab, was seeing the results that was talked about in the video, and there isn't many people trained like that. And so that's why we decided to build the software product and digitize that. And to date, we have an office here and an office in Boston. We have 11 people working out of the office here. Last year we raised about $5 million in venture capital. We have software engineers, product developers, clinical regulatory managers, business development folks on the team. And we're really trying to build a world-class organization from the streets of the Old Port here. And so I'll give you a little kind of more background on product, and then we'll let James jump in and tell you about FlowFold. And so as I've talked about, this is sort of the way we've built our products, where they all have sensors on the feet. They measure walking in real time, feed it into what we call our clinical thinking algorithm, which changes, as you heard, preferred music, where we can time shift it and add a rhythm to it. And that was all developed in-house by our team and then delivered back through headphones. And so that's the company. Happy to talk for days about that at any point in time, but I'm going to turn it back over to James to tell you about what he's doing at FlowFold.
So I'm going to show you a quick video. It's just a product video of our newest product release, and then I'll kind of get into some details about why this particular video I think is relevant. So the last image there was me, I think, on day 3 at Mount Kilimanjaro, where we took 9 versions of a hiking pack, effectively, These are the local denizens. That's YouTube.
Hold on.
Part tote, part backpack.
This is a special video.
Errands.
I don't know how to get to it
The
here.
denizen is made for both men and women and comes in 2 different sizes, 14 liter and 18. They also come with
All right,
That's
everyone
me
should
as
buy
well.
a Denizen
Yeah.
tote bag is what we're trying to say here.
So we brought 9 different bags. I had a team of ambassadors, myself and a videographer. We went to Mount Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro was the ideal place to do prototyping and testing because it's effectively like walking from the equator to the North Pole in 5 days. You start to climb. It's the highest freestanding mountain in the world. The elevation change, you go from about 5,000 feet to 19,341. And you start in the jungle. There's monkeys bouncing around from trees. It's the most luscious thing you've ever seen. And then you go through 5 different temperate climates until you get to the top, which was, in our case, basically Arctic conditions. And we summited it in a blizzard. It took 16 hours. But what we did is we took 9 different bags, we came back, and we kind of Frankensteined them down into what we think is, the perfect multi-day or single-day hiking and travel bag. Why that's relevant is because it's 2 things. I'm going to talk a lot about self-awareness, and I'm 31 now. I've had 10 years of a career, and to me, when Putney sold, it was very important for me to find a process that I really enjoyed. And so for me, to have a company where I was able to go and work and climb Kilimanjaro was very important, right? I didn't want to be a millionaire or a billionaire. I wanted to be able to pay myself $60,000, $70,000 a year and be able to surf whenever I wanted. So that was my definition of success. And if you take away nothing from the rest of the presentation, is make sure you define what your definition of success is. But more about Flowfold in particular, the made in the USA is not our advantage anymore. The average consumer is willing to spend about 10% more for a made in the United States product. I cannot make a bag for 10% more in the United States, so there's a disconnect there. The advantage is being able to, in our new 7,500 square foot facility in Gorham, is we own both prototyping and manufacturing under one roof. So we can act quick, we can act fast, we can react to customer demands. And right now, our demographic is 75% 18 to 35-year-olds, right? And I know millennials are a buzzword, but I really particularly like this Outside Magazine article, which said that the outdoor industry has a millennium problem. And there's a quote there that you can read, but essentially, our demographic, myself included, and you all, we're kind of put off by this ethos, this go for the summit ethos that's been traditionally owned by a lot of the legacy brands, Arc'teryx, North Face. For us, we go out, we're just as likely to go for a day hike or to a music festival or to the beach, and the current developers of outdoor gear have not kind of adapted to that, and they continue to make highly technical products when really what we need in our 700 square foot apartment buildings and a little pooch named Mickey, as Owen has, is just a bag that you can use all the time. And so that's the problem that Flowfold is trying to solve, and we're going to get into more detail there.
Excellent. All right, so now enough about us. A little bit more about entrepreneurship and how we think about it. How many of you may want to be an entrepreneur or think you are entrepreneurial? Yes, a good number of you. Well, that's great. And so, as I think about entrepreneurship, there's a really good definition I like to talk about, and it's sort of, striving for resources that are beyond your control. And so you can be an entrepreneur no matter where you are in any organization, or if you're starting a company yourself. It's more pronounced if you're starting a company yourself, because in the beginning you have no resources, you have no money, you have no product, you have no anything, and so everything is striving for resources beyond your control. But if you end up in a large organization, you can still go out and make things happen that are beyond your authority. Caution you that you don't go too far, because you may break things and people might get angry in those organizations. But as we think about startup organizations, there is a kind of a clear definition I like to use for this, and it's not because other organizations are bad, but because depending on the goal of what organization you're trying to build, it really impacts your strategy. So startup to me is a high growth, scalable organization that has a business model that's repeatable. So as I think about a startup, like a lemonade stand would not be a startup. That would be a small business, and probably a pretty small business. However, could be a great business. Someone could build a really good lemonade stand. If you imagine that your lemonade stand is going to be on every corner in the United States, then it becomes scalable and startup, and you have to design it and replicate it and think about it differently to do that. And so that's sort of how I think about the differences for startup and entrepreneurship.
Right, I think you're spot on. I mean, and to be clear, there's nothing wrong with owning a small business. There's nothing wrong with having a shop in a community and contributing to that community. And again, it just depends on what you want to do, what impact you want to have on yourself, your family, and your community.
Yeah, so then for those of you that do want to be an entrepreneur, do know that no matter how successful an organization has been and how far along they are, that it never starts in a glamorous way. And it's always really difficult in the beginning and throughout as you're doing it. And you may look at organizations like this next one and say, you know, Airbnb has it all figured out. Are any of you staying in Airbnb? Is this? Yes, there we go, a few of you. Has it all figured out. You know, they're everywhere. They're scalable. You know, they're actually kind of past, like kind of in vogue. You know, they're like just mainstream now, which is really important. However, if you look at their story, they started the company in 2007, and they started the company with this idea that this crazy idea they could rent people's extra space in homes. They didn't get any traction on this idea in the beginning. They lived on meager means and worked on it really hard. At one point, they actually, to fund themselves and the organization, in, I believe, around one of the political conventions, sold Obama-O cereal to make money for the organization, to keep it alive while they kept their dream alive. At some point along the way, they found someone to believe in them and give them some money, and then decided to take really good photos of apartments, which made them more attractive because people who would post their own pictures would do a terrible job at that. And then from there, they took off and now are, you know, huge. They're everywhere. And so, but if you look at from 2007 to 2010, like, you know, that period of time, they were essentially doing nothing. You know, they were iterating and making, you know, and believing in the dream and not making any progress. And then they became an overnight success after many nights of feeling not successful. And James has an example similarly of it not being so glamorous to start.
I mean, yeah, there's plenty of examples. I mean, Flowpole's a pretty good example. I never thought I'd have a bean boot for the first time in 107 years. But, you know, for me, like one example that I like is Patagonia, and Let My People Go Surfing is an important book for me personally because of how he culturally thinks about Yvon Chouinard, how to run Patagonia. But Patagonia, I mean, it started out like there's a bold point here where he was basically living off 50 cents a day, and when he started, we're going to talk about problem solving, but when he started, he basically was trying to figure out a better way to do rock climbing. And so Patagonia, which is not known as a rock climbing company right now, it started out as basically just making gear. He went dumpster diving. He figured out how to make his own rock climbing gear, sold it out of the trunk of his cars. It's your quintessential broken stoked story. And as he continued to grow, he continued to find new problems to solve. And so, you know, Patagonia is one of the most shocking things I learned is that they're kind of famous for the rugby shirt. They were the first person to bring that in. Far before Abercrombie brought in the rugby shirt and made it popular, Patagonia noticed that there was a problem with outdoor clothing, and so then they became a clothing company. But even Patagonia in 1991 had growing pains. The economy kind of collapsed. There was a recession, and they had to get a revolving loan. They had to cut costs drastically. They had to cut off 20% of their workforce. And it was culture that really got them through that difficult time. And of course, now they're a $200 million company. They're a leader in the outdoor space. They're aspirational for brands like my own and other startup outdoor companies. And I really enjoyed that quote. Patagonia's image is a human voice. It expresses the joy of people who love the world, who are passionate about their beliefs, and who want to influence the future. They have been steadfast on their core values, so we may or may not get into this, but if you're going to start your own company, you have to clearly understand what your core values are, and theirs are brilliantly simple. You know, build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, and not be bound by convention. That is their DNA, and every, you know, I don't work there, but I'd imagine that every product development meeting, every HR meeting, everything that they do is based around this idea of build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm. So another great example of a company that everyone thinks of now as being a leader, but really struggled and started off quite small.
Yeah, and so I guess the takeaway isn't that you have to build one of these companies, but it's more of, if you think you're going to be struggling in the beginning, it's true, but like lots of people who have built great things had, started from no glamorous means. But so then where do you start is really the question. If you have an idea or you think you have an idea or you want to start a company, I think to me, this next one is the most important part of starting a company, and it is the team. At the end of the day, whatever you set out to do is likely going to be slightly wrong, but who you go with and who you work with is going to make the difference between success or failure. And as you think about starting an organization, founding teams, typically in companies, the most successful are somewhere between 1 and 3 people. The 0 is tough because there's no one working on it, so that's tough. And then 3 or more, you tend to get more personalities. No one really holds the vision. No one really sets the culture. And it's been done. You can give me edge cases where people have been successful that way, but usually that's where it is. So 1 to 3 people, and then typically what you need to see in any organization, no matter what you're building, is what they call, this is Silicon Valley terms, but a hacker and a hustler. And so what does that mean? You need someone to build said product, and then you need someone to sell the dream for said product. In a team of 1, obviously that person is the same person. In a team of 2 or 3, you can carve up those responsibilities. But if you don't have a way to sell the dream or sell the product and the build product, then you're hard to build a company there. You also need to make sure that you have a high level of trust in whoever you're starting the organization with. Because oftentimes you'll be working together for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That's a long-term commitment. And if you don't trust them, you don't think they're going to make decisions that has the organization's best interest at heart, then you're also going to fail because of people issues, which is one of the number 1 reasons why organizations fail. And you have to have a bias towards action. It's really good to think about and write reports, but at the end of the day, things need to get done early on, and the quicker you can make decisions, the quicker things can get done. And the really cool thing actually about starting a company is that you get to practice making probably 10 to 20 fairly significant decisions per day that come up along the way that, if you were working, and I spent some time working in a larger organization, you might make 10 or 20 a quarter that are big decisions. And so you can kind of flex your decision-making muscle that way. And the other piece is, if you're kind of new and you haven't had success before, the best way to jumpstart success is to find advisors and mentors. For us at MedRhythms, we've been super fortunate that we brought on Jean Hoffman from Putney, actually, who James helped introduce us to as a board member early on, who had successfully built her company. She can kind of see around the corner and give us advice on what might be coming next. And really we can borrow from her 30 or 40 years of in-depth experience to try to avoid some of the pitfalls along the way. And we try to do that in every key function of the organization.
Before you jump into your example, which is awesome, I love your example, I want to interrupt and say that agree 100%, the team is going to be the single most important part of obviously the company. And the success of the company, more than what the product is or whether you have IP or whether you have FDA approval, is going to be who your team is. And the other key thing that I've seen when people fail, the reason is most of the time ego related. Yeah. When it's a hacker that doesn't know how to hustle and doesn't want to hustle, or a hustler that doesn't know how to build anything, right? So don't let your ego get in the way. Like I've always said, you'd be better off if you are, if you're an incredible artist or a computer programmer or something, but you have no ability to network and to sell your product, you can either execute long-term patience, develop that skill over a course of several months or several years, or you can say, I'm going to give up 20% of my company and give it to somebody who is absolutely excellent at what I'm not good at. And so many people don't have the ability to do that, even give up 20% or 30% because if they feel like it's too much like their own company, and that is 100% ego and the cause of a lot of people not being successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, to jump off that, actually there's like a paradox oftentimes in organizations for if you're a founder, like you did build it from the ground up. You did kind of think about, you kind of were there from the beginning. You feel like it's all your own. And so there's this book called Founders Dilemmas that talks about the rich versus king kind of paradox. And like this could also be like, I like to rephrase it as like impact versus control. And so if you want to keep full control and not like let other people into your vision and mission and give them some ownership in the company, et cetera, well, you're going to limit your ability to succeed because you can't scale one person. It's really hard. And so, there's a fine balance there. On the other end of the scale, if you give away a lot, oftentimes you can grow the pie and make it bigger overall, even though you might have a smaller sliver. And so then the second most important thing about team is the fact that, if you have the founding team, then you need to figure out, okay, what type of people do we need in our industry to succeed or for the job to be done? And so my perfect example of recruiting the right type of people for the right type of industry is on the Antarctic exploring industry, actually, and this isn't company related, but it's related to this quote over here, which is, says, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of darkness, a bunch of things, and recognition in case of success. This was Ernest Shackleton put this out, who was a really famous Antarctic explorer, and really good thing that he did, because the ship got caught in the Antarctic along the way. It got trapped. They were there for many, many months on the ice, and somehow, because he recruited the right type of people to be part of the organization, they didn't give up hope of survival. Even when the ship sank, they kept moving. They kept staying alive, and were able to find a way to get rescue. And so that's a very good analogy to an organization where sometimes you may need to keep going, even though it may seem dark, because timing may turn around. You may have a breakthrough at the last minute, and it's that perseverance that survives. And if you recruit the right type of people, you don't need to put out an ad like this to do it, but you get the right type of people in the organization. That's very helpful. All right, so now you have a team. Do you want to go through this slide?
Sure. So this is kind of your you've probably seen this, Crossing the Chasm. There's a good book on that, and it kind of talks about being able to solve a problem, right? So we talked a little about what Flowfold's problem was. It was a marketplace and a customer base that wasn't really getting the products that they needed in order to live their life the way that they wanted, right? What I call it everyday adventure versus extreme adventure, but Owen's problem was very different. They started with music therapy and doing one-on-one therapy sessions, and then that kind of problem evolved over time, and now I have full faith and confidence that Owen's going to be a billion-dollar company someday. So, but not to put too much pressure on you.
Strong claim.
Yeah, it's a strong claim. So I think that you need to identify what your problem is, right? First and foremost, and be understanding that like Amazon started selling books, right? Now they're not that kind of company anymore. Uber originally was just going to be for renting limousines. So your problem can change over time, but there has to be a problem that you're addressing, and there has to be a market for it. So you need to identify your customers. You need a minimum viable product. And you don't really have to spend a tremendous amount of money to identify these problems or minimum viable products. And you can do an easy survey among friends and family. You can make a prototype pretty easily and test it, and it doesn't even have to be a physical thing. It can be a software. You can just kind of collect information and data, and then kind of execute on the vision and mission after that.
Yeah, no, that's good. How many of you are actually thinking about working on a problem or an area that we got one person back here. Another. What area are you thinking about? Great. No, that's really good. What about you? Recycling of waste material. Well, that's great. Yeah. So that's good. It's sort of the picking the problem area. And knowing what the problem is important, because then you can really kind of optimize the solution, and you can do a lot of that without even having to build it. You can do a bunch of testing, like James said, with seeing how much people are willing to pay by doing some surveys, or going out there and seeing if people will click on ads, and if it's something that's really important to them, or other types of strategies for that. There's actually a really good book on that, which is down here, called The Lean Startup, which is sort of this hypothesis, test, learn, hypothesis cycle, where you can do a lot of that without having to build anything or spend a dime on anything.
In the power that you have now, even even in the palm of your hands with your phone, is incredible. There, just to give you an idea, when Flowfold is thinking about product development, right, and solving a problem, sometimes we don't even have to come up with the problem. We'll go on Amazon. There's apps that crawl through Amazon, and you can type in, for instance, diaper bag, and Amazon will look at their data, and they will be able to tell you there is low supply, or it's not searched often, so there's a high demand and there's low competition. So if there's high demand and low competition, well then Flowfold should make a diaper bag. Theoretically, you always want to stay culturally sound. But if I made like a really cool, lightweight, hyper tactical diaper bag that you could take on a hike, therefore now all of a sudden it is sort of culturally relevant.
Is that in the works now? Should we be watching out for the Flowfold
There may
diaper
be,
bag?
yeah, there may be a tactical diaper bag coming out.
Okay.
But I mean, so Amazon helped me identify what that problem is by understanding that there's a market, there's a hole basically in the market that needs to get filled, and so then we can put that through our product development cycle.
Yeah, that's good. All right, well then, so the next part is, if I could work the clicker.
You can also do Google Analytics too. Like you can do search terms, and you can look at sustainability, and the search terms are like straight up, right? So you know that it's relevant, and relevancy can lead to problem solving.
Right, and so now if you have a team and you have a problem to solve, you still don't have a company, because you might have a hobby, you might have something that's really interesting to think about and work on. You might have a nonprofit, all of these things. But if you want to build a company or even a nonprofit that's sustaining, you really need to think about building out a plan in 4 key buckets. And those key buckets being the customer value proposition, which is right here. And I have, if anyone wants it, they can find me after. I have a whole document that goes through a bunch of questions here on this. And that's really that problem solution statement, like what is that problem you're solving and how your solution does it. And so you would have done that in the first part. It's the technology.
Yeah, it's for the CVP. I tell my team I do X for Y so they can Z. Like, it's a really simple way of doing it. You can read a whole bunch of books and stuff on it, but I do X for Y so they can Z. You just need to be able to answer that question and like basically have it tattooed on your brain. I do X for Y so they can Z. That's what do you do, who do you do it for, and why are you doing it for them, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to think about it. The next one is technology and operations management. You need a way to deliver said solution. And so in James's case, he needs a shop that builds these products, whether that's his own shop or some other shop that does that, and you need a way to sort of, manage orders coming in. You need a way to manage cash coming in, all of these other things. And so, that technology operations management is really important.
And by no means trying to patronize anybody, but, there's fixed and there's variable cost structures. You have to understand that as you grow, that technology and operations management changes. So as our POs became bigger, as we went from a craft company selling wall outside the trunks of our car to shipping out pallets to LL Bean in Japan, we needed to change our technical and operations management. We needed contract manufacturers in Tennessee and Chicago to be able to do those larger scale POs. So just understand that this is it's not written in stone. You're going to have to adapt these as you go.
Yeah, in our case, we need people to build the software. We need the systems in place for the FDA to make sure that we are building, highly compliant software, et cetera. And that kind of falls in that bucket. The next one is a profit formula. I mean, this is you need to find a way that it makes money. And so that is, revenue minus cost somehow. And then what does that look like? Every industry is different. You can benchmark that based on the industry you're in to see roughly where it is. And if you find out a way to do it better, then you can build yourself a really good business.
Yeah, my margins are going to be much different than Owen's. And so circling back to team, you need somebody on your team who's doing this and looking at this. I don't look at it. And if it wasn't for Devin, I would have an extremely fun bankrupt company because I don't care about margins and I just want to get as many people product as possible. So have always somebody, if I go to Devin and we have an initiative that's under 40% margin, he makes me make a compelling marketing stance and sometimes take it out of the marketing budget. So just make sure you always have somebody looking into your profit.
Great, and then the last one being go to market. Like, how do you reach people? How do you market? How do you sell? You do need a direct sales force. Do you need to do it online, et cetera, from there. Does anyone have questions? I mean, we have some more stuff, but people have some questions out there. Yes?
I noticed that you guys are both local, so if you're
Yes.
So it sounds like you definitely went to Boston
Yes.
for a while. And did you ever live out of state before?
No, I've traveled
Almost.
a fair
You
bit
almost
because
lived
of
in the
work.
States.
Almost did. Yeah, no, I got stuck here. But no, I did not.
Because I'm leading into what made you choose to come back to Maine and what made you choose to stay here and have a business?
Yeah, so the question is, I have to say, there's people online, so I'm going to repeat the question. What made us stay in Maine and build a business in Maine? A couple of things. One is, I think more and more, great businesses can be created anywhere, and particularly the southern Maine area is a really vibrant, exciting community right now, and it's one that we can find talented people, and we can really kind of build a culture that we want here. And my wife is also from Maine. This is the other backstory was when I said I was graduating business school at HBS at Harvard, and they were like. And I was like, hey, I'm going to start a company, and I'm not going to really have a salary for a period of time. And my wife was like, well, that's great, but that wasn't the plan. So we're going to move back to Maine, and we're going to live 3 miles from where I work, and you're going to build a company. That was another reason for that, because she was very generous to let me go off on this endeavor. But being here actually has made a lot of difference for the company, and it's been really good for both my co-founder and I.
Yeah, you can't. Thinking startups and entrepreneurship is great. Life kind of can get in the way, obviously, right? Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, my co-owners have families in Maine as well as I do, so it can be difficult to leave. I'm going to answer the question slightly differently as well, and just say that there are obviously pros and cons to being in anywhere, right? So where your market is going to be important potentially. Owen and I have talked a little bit about, and kind of endearingly, but like a Maine toxin, which is basically like it can be challenging. Like I remember, when Owen was trying to raise $500,000, there's people that said, why $500,000? Why seems like a lot. Can you get away with $200,000? Now, if Owen were to go in Boston or San Francisco or New York and say, I want to raise $500,000, the people there might say, it seems like not enough. Why don't you just do your A round and go get $5 million, right? So just make sure, no matter where you are, the relevancy of who you surround yourself with is as important as the location you're in. And so as a way to like kind of get rid of this, like Maine is humble and hardworking, and that's one of the things that makes Maine such a special place to live, but it makes it sometimes challenging to start a company. And so just surround yourself with some people that keep you hungry, keep you motivated, and then you can start a company from literally anywhere. Yeah,
but just to double down, I mean, like I think being here has been much better than being in Boston, actually, and that we actually found, we had investors ask us this. They said, well, why are you in Maine? I said, why wouldn't we be in Maine? Like Portland, like literally was the #1 food city in the US according to Bon Appetit magazine. There's talented people that are working remotely, that are working here. There's people that want to move here, and get into the culture, and everyone works hard, and they're humble, and they have the right kind of criteria that we need to build a successful company. So why not here? It's actually one of the most aggressive stances I take about anything with our business, and so. Yes. So the question was, in Maine, what do you think is the most challenging, the competition or the customers? So I'll take a first crack at that. I actually would say neither, because in our case, we're building a product that could reach people all over the place. If you look at the people that have strokes, there's actually the stroke belt in the U.S., which is in the southern part of the U.S., and we'll reach them from here just as easily as we would in Boston or San Francisco, those customers. And then the competition, in digital therapeutics, there's probably 15 companies in the world that are doing FDA-regulated prescription digital therapeutics, and we're part of the alliance that does that. And so the competition is light right now, and we're hoping to kind of generate a new wave of a new industry. I think, so neither. So that's probably a bad answer to your question, but neither of those are challenges. I think some of the challenges might be getting over some of the misconceptions about the area, which I come out strong with investors and things.
Yeah, I mean, there's something called like the trailing spouse. And
Yeah.
So if you want to start recruiting is probably the real challenge, right? I mean, like even if you look at, you would expect that we're founded in Maine and we're 3 Maine kids that started the company, but Maine isn't even in my top 10 states as far as business is concerned. So it wouldn't be customers. The market is wide open now when you talk about selling things online. So it's about being able to recruit talent in, and if there's not another job for that spouse, whoever he or she is, it can be difficult to move a family. So recruitment can be challenging sometimes. But again, that's changing because Portland is becoming an unbelievable place to work and live. So.
Yeah. Question here.
So the question was around the courage to kind of start something, and to be perfectly honest, we didn't have, we started slow, very slow. And I don't know, if you ask me now, could I do it again in right now? And start this. I don't know what the answer would be. And the reason is because in 2010 when we made the LLC, it was kind of the Wild West of online sales. I could go on Amazon, list a product, and literally email you and ask you to write a review. So much has changed over the last decade that made it a little bit easier for me to start slower back then. But you have to keep in mind that Devin, Charlie, and I all had full-time jobs. And then, we were working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we raised $200,000 in November of 2015 to help us go full-time, right? And that raise enabled us to basically at least have a little bit of a livable salary to help us take that jump, right? The one thing that I can say to everybody in this room is that you have to understand, I've asked you to define success. I want you to define risk as well, right? So how old are you? You're 23? So you're 23, right? So you could, I'm 30. You have 7 years. Nothing that I can do, no matter how much money I can't buy 7 years, right? You could fail every 2 years for the next 3 years and be 30. I mean, think about that from a risk perspective, right? And then if you really want me to get really ethereal here, really high level, there's a lot more shitty things that can happen in your life. Not to scare you, but you can die. A friend of the family can get sick. Your own there's. Social risk is real risk. Personal risk is real risk. Now, whether or not your company fails, I mean, you're gonna overcome it. Ask Owen. Let me ask you this question: you've raised money. If you raise money and the company fails, do you think that's really going to be a hindrance for you going and raising another round at a different company?
No. I think that it would be super
stole or go to jail or
because
something.
we have employees and we're building a vision and you never want to fail, right? And so that's never a goal. But at the end of the day, those things do happen.
So you can fail and it's not the end of the world. So that helps maybe change how you evaluate risk potentially.
Yeah. Question here.
So the question is around proof of concept and in relationship to how we really understand. I think, if I'm putting words in your mouth, realize that using recycled and upcycled materials was the way to go. For us, it was cheaper, right? So some of this is a little bit good fortune. It was before being green and recycled and upcycling was popular. We did it because we got material for 50 cents on the dollar, and we were able to use it. And we took this material that would have otherwise sat in a landfill. And again, I think it's really important to understand that it was important to us, right? Our first office was this dump on Pine Point Beach. And we picked that place because we could go surf in the morning and then come into work, right? And so we were hippies at heart. And when I started working at Flowfold, I had long hair, a man bun, the works, right?
I tried to put that picture on the slides, and James cut it.
I cut it out. Yeah. So it was important to us. That's the most important thing. It was important to us, and that's why we decided to do it. Now, fast forward to today, it's very easy. I have a recycled line and a non-recycled line, and every day of the week and twice on Sunday, the recycled line outperforms the non-recycled line. Has nothing to do with how the product looks, has nothing to do with how the product performs. It's because recycled is a more searchable term, and because my core audience, 18 to 35-year-olds, want to support using upcycled materials.
Do you have a question back here? Yep. Yeah. So the question was, I went to HBS. Was it worth it or not, and was it helpful in starting the company? And so, I mean, I'm biased, so I think it was worth it for sure. And I would say there was definitely some benefits from starting the company's perspective. Was that a bunch of my classmates were also investors from families and things, and could get involved, could give us introductions, and even today, like the network's really helpful to get introductions into folks. And it also was, we started kind of working and thinking about med rhythms. I was advising Brian my second year there, and the really cool thing, even coming out of undergrad, is 1 year in school, like you have some free time to think about and build something and get something to a point where it's less risky to launch out. And so just being there around really smart people where I could test some business ideas with, was very helpful from that perspective. And so yeah, I think it was worth it. Though I will say that, plenty of entrepreneurs come from all walks of life and all backgrounds. And it is not necessarily like an entrepreneur factory to go to HBS. It's mostly known for going into work at large corporates or private equity or investing.
Owen is successful because he executes. And I think he would be successful whether or not he went to HBS. And the reason why I say that is because I'm biased the other direction, right? Don't listen to the propaganda either way, that you need to go to college or that's a tremendous amount of waste of money and you shouldn't even go to undergrad, right? Because you can learn cheaply online. It's about the relationships that you build in, regardless whether it's at HBS or not going to college, about who you surround yourself with, relationships you build. And if you go to HBS and you think, well, I graduated from Harvard, I'm entitled to success, then you will likely probably fail. Owen never had that entitlement. Owen grew up in the North. He worked. There's no one I've met that works harder than him on a basketball court. He's a little dangerous. But that's, I think, so that's, in my opinion, that's why he's success. Now, does it, all things being evil, or level rather, does him having a Harvard business degree help him, and so either like stature or in connection? Absolutely. But I would, you bet on the pony, not the horse, or you bet on the jockey, not the horse, right? Something like that. Anyway, I bet on him. So.
James is like the bet, is what we're getting at.
Yeah. I'm the better. And
yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I'll start. Yeah. Do I consider myself to be the hustler or the hacker? I think the answer is going to be the same. I'm the hustler. I don't know how. I don't know how to sew. I don't even want to. I don't want to do our books. Yet? No, I don't do anything. Okay. Actually, this is kind of a funny thing because Owen is like sort of in my mentor group, right? We talk about that, and I remember I had a moment where I was like, I was really upset because I talked to Owen. I was like, I'm not good at anything. Right, I was like a little bit lost. I'm like, I don't know how to code. I'm not an engineer. Like, I'm not really great at anything.
I remember this.
And
yeah.
Owen kind of like wanted to slap me, and he was like, there's plenty of people that are talented in one particular thing that have absolutely zero emotional, EQ, right, and have plenty of IQ. And, I did terrible on my SATs. I did terrible on my ACTs. I absolutely failed miserably the MCATs. I failed so bad. I've lied so much on my score. I don't remember what I got. But I graduated with a 4.0, and I have, been successful in my career. And and so I think that part of that is because of the fact that I'm self-aware enough to know what I'm good at, and that is hustling. That is getting up on stage. And it happens to be what my two co-owners are not good at. They're the hackers.
Yeah, good question. I would also say that I lean more towards the hustler side of things. It's I did have a bioengineering background, but I was never great at engineering things, but I was good at like figuring out information and like repurposing it and making it sound better over time. And so I am a sort of a wannabe hacker. I can't write software code, but I do like to think about and design some algorithms and like how they could operate on paper. And so I guess hustler, wannabe hacker. Yes. Yeah, so the question is, have you ever dealt with friends or people you know well who wanted to be part of the organization, and how do you say no to them? And so So on the reverse of that, my co-founder, Brian, actually was one of my best friends. And so that was, and I knew I wanted to build an organization with him. I've known him since UMaine, and he's also from Northern Maine. But for people that, I'm probably thinking of 4 or 5 that have come out of the woodwork that have sent me like Facebook messages that said, hey, if you ever need any work in this, can I help out? And I think, it's just the quick, the quick no. Like, it's like, not available right now, like, no, like, it just doesn't fit. Like, it's nothing against you. Like, we don't have any opportunities that fit your background. And, like, it's much better than, like, if you think about the reverse side, when you get someone involved that either may not do a good job or may not fit the culture, et cetera, you're going to hurt the other people there. And so, like, the quick no is much better than the, and it's tough. But if you say there's nothing available, there's nothing available.
Right. I'll add that I'm also very close friends. I was at Devin's bachelor party when he got married, and so your relationship will change. I mean, just so I think that I have a very good relationship with Devin and Charlie, my 2 co-owners, but it changes. I mean, we spend 8, 9, 10 hours together every day, and we make really stressful decisions. We don't often leave and go have a beer after work, right? Like, we go and live our lives. So it changes. So always be cognizant of that.
You don't drink a lot of beer anyway.
If you do sort of end up working with friends. The other thing I'll say is it's super easy to be like, yeah, sure, if you want to make $35,000 a year. Like, a lot of, right? Like, they just think that entrepreneurialism is kind of sexy. They think you're printing money or whatever. So you could be like, well, we don't have anything. If you want to make what I'm making, which isn't very much, maybe we can find something. And most times they won't want to do that, right? They're just looking for a handout. So it's always easy to say, like, yeah, we're on an entrepreneurial budget. We can't hire anybody right now. We're bringing on interns. And then no one wants to be an intern that's, 35 and just looking for 6 figures.
Oh, and sometimes I just blame Brian, and he blames me. It could work, but Brian says no. So, good.
We do that. We do that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how do you keep up with the technology? And so there's multiple facets to this for us, particularly since we are going after an FDA-regulated prescription product, which by its nature, it's hard to change technology after you do it. And so we both are building with best in class today, trying to keep an eye on things like augmented and virtual reality. And like, we're really connected into like the new edge things that are getting funded, and knowing what excellence looks like out there. And so, I follow a bunch of newsletters that every day send me information about like what's the top VCs are putting money into, which kind of is like usually where the edge of technology are. And then every Sunday I actually carve out like 2 hours and like read this like really far out like deep learning, AI, et cetera, types of, blogs and newsletters.
That's so important what he said, and how we talk about it at Flowfold is make sure you spend time on your business and not just in your business. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, like, in our case, you can get so myopic on just making sure that what you're doing is working and that you're the everyday things that you have to in order for your company to be successful, but you need to take a step back. Like for us, we're constantly following like e-commerce blogs, and we're trying to figure out what is that new technology, what software should we be using, or is it Shopify or is it WooCommerce, right? And I think the second thing is that you need to, I talked a lot about ego, right? You may go to your co-owners or co-founders and be like, I have the greatest idea and what we need to be able to do this, and you execute it and you initiate it and it works awesome. But you know what? Something might come out, and you have to be able to be like, I think this is better, even though that was my idea and it worked for a little while, or maybe it didn't work. You need to be able to just say, okay, let's test this. And I also like to say, like, you don't need to be an expert in all the technologies. Know it well enough to know it's being done well, right? Like, I don't really know Facebook ads that well. I know it well enough to know if it's working. And so my marketing manager can become the expert. So you can kind of distribute that pressure of knowing all the different technologies that impact your business.
Got it. I think we're coming up 1 o'clock. Yeah. So in couple of closing comments, which is really builds off that. I think in every walk of life or anything you do, whether it be in startup, et cetera, and James literally just said this and maybe on script, but you got to know what excellence is. You got to know what really good is. And so whatever that strategy is, whether that's, reading the thought leaders in the space, checking in with other people, et cetera, that's really important because this is my engineer in me. If you do bad, you end up at this part of the curve. If you work really hard, you could end up in this part of the curve, which is the local maxima. But if you don't know what excellence is, you may end up here. But if you know what it is, then you can achieve the kind of the global maxima. And so, there's different ways to do it, whether it be reading different books, et cetera. And then finally, it's, to me, and James has a good point on this as well, but it's, the outcomes are important because it's really good to see what success are, but they're not the most important. Really lucky people can have good outcomes that you shouldn't emulate and trust. It's really the process of how you go about it, the process of achievement that's really important. And I put this sort of quote from The Dark Knight Rises here where Bane attacks and destroys Batman. And he has this quote where he says, victory has defeated you, because you can get soft the more you achieve things. And really, if you focus on building a process that you like and or that's successful, then that will be most important going forward.
This is really important. I talked about, understanding what your definition of success is. The process is so important. And the one thing I would change about the entrepreneurial landscape, if I could, is that this over-sensationalization of lack of sleep, right? And you're going to hear people tell you that start your business and then off hours work Uber and you're going to work 20 hours a day and you're going to sleep for 4 if you're lucky, and that's how you have to be successful. And it's bullshit. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're going to just burn out or go broke or just, there's a reason why one of the highest demographics of suicide rates are entrepreneurs is because they're trying this model, which they think is the only way to do it, because Elon Musk once said that if he works 16 hours a day to your 8, he's going to do 2 times as much work. But what people don't understand is that Elon Musk is a nerd, and work for him is building a rocket launcher or flame thrower, right? He likes what he does, so he doesn't care if he's in his room for 16 hours a day. So if you enjoy the process, awesome. I don't mind going and climbing Kilimanjaro. The whole part was work, all right? And I had an allergic reaction to sunscreen and almost died, but I loved every minute of it. So I think if you don't enjoy the process, nothing else we talked about is even going to matter remotely. So enjoy the process. Try to find some happiness.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your time. James and I will be up here if you want to come and talk to us. If anyone who asks a question can get a giveaway that we have up here, so feel free to come up and grab that. So.